Last week we read a story called The Fisherman and His Wife. And this week today we're gonna read a story every day, but today we are going to be reading The Emperor's New Clothes. Before we read it, I want to review some of the things we learned about fairy tales last week. So these are a few of the different elements of the fairy tales that I want to go over. We have our setting, our characters, the beginning, because we talked about how fairy tales start a lot of the times. They use the words that they use. And some of the main events and lessons that we learn in fairy tales, because sometimes we see the same things over and over again in fairy tales, just in different stories. So for our setting, I know that we often see castles. We often see things happen in the woods. Where else do we normally see kingdoms? And usually they happen in a time where they don't tell us exactly when it happened, but we can tell it was a long time ago because we don't see airplanes or cars. We don't see microwaves and refrigerators and light bulbs usually. Usually it looks like it's a long time ago. So I'm going to put for one of the settings in the past. That means that it happened before. It's not in the future and it's not happening now. It happened in the past. For our characters, we oftentimes see royalty. We see princes and princesses, kings, queens. We see, this is why I bought this hat. We see witches, maybe ogres. We're kind of starting to get into our monsters now. We see talking animals. And we see magical creatures. I guess that's what I could have put instead of like ogres and witches. We see magical characters. Okay. Now for beginning, and this was in one of our quizzes, we see it over and over again. The first words in a fairy tale. Not every time, but a lot of the time. Once upon a time. And that is another way of saying the past. Because they're saying this once happened in a different time, not our time. And they're not saying it's going to happen later on. This has already happened. This is an old story. But they're not telling us exactly when it happened. That's the one thing that we see a lot. We also see once upon a time. We see long ago. Things like that. And events and lessons that we see a lot. We see it's gonna be a lot, so I'm not gonna write it this time. I'll write it later. We see battles between good and evil. We see good characters trying to beat bad characters. We see magical events happening. We have lessons like never give up, always tell the truth, follow your dreams come true. Usually the fairy tales have a positive end, so they're telling us a positive story, and we have good feelings at the end of a fairy tale.